Good evening. Welcome to the Salem Area Mass Transit District Board of Directors meeting for March. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order, and I'd like to note for the record that we do have a quorum in attendance, so we're able to take action this evening, and I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'll ask General Manager Pollock to lead us in the safety moment.
Sure. Thank you, President Davidson. I thought for the safety moment, I have actually two topics. First one, I want to take a step back on. So if you all remember, 3 years ago this month was the start of the COVID pandemic. And 3 years ago, the end of next week is when a dark day for Cherriots, when we did our 6-day suspension as a result of COVID, and then returned to COVID level services. It really changed how we did business, but the important thing I want to share is the men and women of Cherriots did an outstanding job through a very difficult time. They were resilient and were able to provide essential service to our community for those people who were required to take essential trips. But from a safety aspect, one of the lessons learned is the importance of being prepared. During the pandemic, we took immediate safety actions, like having people work from home who were able to, installing barriers to protect our transit operators, rear door boarding, sanitizing, and suspension of fares to minimize impact. And so those were the immediate actions, but also the long-term lesson learned was really to make sure we focus on emergency preparedness. And at the district, we've done that and have focused our security and emergency management staff to make sure there's an emphasis on preparedness for any future emergency, whether it's a pandemic or some other situation. And then I'd also make note that from a safety perspective, this weekend, believe it or not, they're calling for snow in the valley floor this over the weekend. So it's not over yet. So don't put away your cold weather gear quite yet. That concludes my safety message.
Thank you, General Manager Pollock. Next, I'd like to note a change to the agenda. So we will be pulling 7A on the agenda. That is action item, or excuse me, that is an action item, and we'll be discussing or considering that action at next month's meeting. So next, we'll go ahead and proceed to public comment. And I'd like to invite any members of the public who are either in attendance physically or virtually to go ahead and provide comment. All right. Next, we'll go ahead and consider the consent calendar. Unless there's any issues, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
Okay, there's a motion.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? I'd like to just first note that the memo from Clerk of the Board, Cressy, was excellent, and it prompted me to consider some things. And so I would love to ask the general manager to maybe consider some of the language that we use in the budget committee. Specifically, so in our last meeting, we considered changing the name of the Citizen Advisory Committee to Community Advisory Committee. So in that spirit, to see if we could maybe consider changing the citizen members of the budget committee to community members. I know budget law is a beast unto itself, so I don't know if that's possible, but I would ask if that's something you could look into.
I will.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion on this motion?
I don't have a discussion on the motion, but I'm just really excited to have a budget committee member. And I'm also really excited about who it is. If anybody's into knitting, Marie is a published author and leads many knitting retreats.
She's a published author on knitting, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Next, we'll go ahead and proceed to the first informational report, which is on the Youth Zero program update.
Thank you. I'd ask Chris French, our service planning manager, and Jonah Hansen, our marketing coordinator, to please present the report.
Good evening, President Davidson and members of the board. We're here this evening to provide an update on the Youth Zero program. The update will cover September to December of 2022. So the Youth Zero program is a collaboration between Cherriots, the Salem Kaiser School Districts, City of Salem, and Kaiser. And we've worked really hard in the last few months to really spearhead this program and working with each of the agencies to get our intergovernmental agreements for the program and really get started with this. And from that, I'll pass it over to Jonah.
Good evening. So this partnership has really brought a lot of new ridership to our system. And Chris is going to get into the details of that in just a bit here. But as you can imagine, with a lot of new ridership, many of whom have probably never ridden on a Cherriots bus or maybe even used public transportation before in their lives, this presents a real opportunity for education for this new group of riders. And the feedback that we started hearing shortly after the Youth Zero Pass was implemented was kind of confirmed this for us. So frontline staff, operators, customer service reps started hearing and seeing some concerning behaviors with some of our new ridership. And a lot of these focused on areas of etiquette, safety, and it just so happened that many of those topics were covered in a recent customer education campaign that we'd done using, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the colorful characters or creatures that you see here. And again, covering a lot of those similar topics. And so shortly after the partnership with the school district was finalized, we put our marketing team in touch with the school district's public relations team and started looking at how can we quickly get information out to students, to parents. And so we shared with them the customer education campaign materials that we had used. They really liked it. They thought that would be a great kind of ready to go way to get information in front of students and youth. And so we provided them with the materials so that they could get those up on their social media platforms as quickly as possible. And we also fortunately had saved a lot of the signage that we had posted inside of our bus from the campaign. So we were able to repurpose that and just repost it inside of our bus. Additionally, the school district, they've been using methods such as school newsletters, posting information about the campaign on their website. They're putting information with their internal staff communication channels, and then also sharing with community resource specialists. And I'm happy to report that at one of our most recent service excellence team meetings, we heard some feedback from some of our operator representatives there who said they've already seen kind of some dramatic improvements in the behavior of some of the youth ridership. But we also wanted to look at, is there anything new that with some of the new ridership that wasn't covered in the original customer education campaign? And so we got good collaboration from our transportation department, from customer service representatives, from our security department, and we landed on 5 additional messages that weren't covered in the original campaign. And so we took the same characters from the original campaign and put the new situations in place. So these cover topics like respecting other riders' space at the fare box, so students waiting for the customer at the fare box to pay before they try to board the bus. Another one that was definitely a major concern is standing too close to the street when the bus is approaching. That's obviously a pretty major safety concern. Another thing that this was new for a lot of youth riders is that traffic doesn't behave the same around a Cherriots bus as it does around a school bus. So making sure that they understand that it's not safe to cross in front of the bus and cross the street like it is on a school bus. Another one that's more of an etiquette thing, pulling the cord when you want to get off the bus, not for fun, which can ruin the experience for other riders on the bus. And then lastly, the poles, or we call stanchions on our bus, are there just for holding on for safety, not for pull-ups or swinging or climbing or those kind of activities. And so with these new 5 messages, we're going to be working with the school district to do some co-posting here in the coming months with these new messages. And so additionally, on top of what we've already been doing with this partnership campaign, we're working a video project with the school district and addressing some of the same issues, also kind of some how to ride information that students will find useful. And the school district's advice was to use peer-to-peer advocacy for this so that it will resonate with students. So in the early stages of the project, we brought some student representatives in. They gave us some input on what they thought made the most sense, tone, and just kind of what, time frame on a video for attention span, all that kind of input. And when we get to the actual filming portion of the project, we'll be using some students as actors in the film or the movie, video, whatever you want to call it. And we will also use them as ambassadors for the campaign. And then just kind of looking forward beyond this, we're going to continue to just partnership with the school district, look for other opportunities to communicate and use them as a platform to help us get information out. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris. He's going to get into kind of more of the details of the ridership by the members.
Thank you. For youth ridership, we have a few things that we want to cover. We're looking at FY22 to 23 comparison of ridership. We also included comparing the impacts of the youth fare change on ridership, looking at the reduction of fares in 2019 and then the 2022 youth zero pass. And then looking at the calendar year of 2019 pre-pandemic and comparing that to 2022 with the post-pandemic ridership. So first, we're looking at the total ridership for the comparing of FY22 to 23. And you can see that we've had a significant increase, the blue line being 2023. We've seen significant growth. September was the start date, so you see a pretty steep. But also July and August, prior to it, we were seeing youth ridership come back. So that kind of is just kind of to gauge. The youth zero has had a big impact, but there was also some ridership that was just coming back compared to the previous year pandemic conditions. So this slide is looking at the comparison of the first 2018-19 reduction of fares. So that program started in June of 2019, and we saw that it was a little bit increased over the previous year, but then saw a really steep climb for July, August, and September, and through the year. And with it starting in September, we saw, the start and then increasing and then coming down a little bit. We see fluctuation by time of year in ridership. So, but the increase was significant. This is looking at comparing all 2018 through 2022. And you can see that 2018 is the red line. With the youth fare, the reduction of fare, we saw a significant increase of ridership for 2019. And then 2021 and 2022, we see that increase. I want to point out that we have seen an increase in youth ridership, but we still haven't reached that level of what we had in 2019 prior to the pandemic. And this is looking at 2019 comparing to 2022, and just showing for the full year how it trends. We have a couple months where we've been close to that. We haven't exceeded that level yet, but we've been close. But we're continuing to see ridership increase. Next, we'll look at the regional system, the effect that it had, and you can see that regional ridership, those are really big percentages. One thing to think about as we look at the percentages for the regional system, there's a lot fewer riders, so smaller increases show really big percentages in increases. This is a similar, the comparing year over year, 2018 through 2022. As with the local system, we've actually surpassed our ridership pre-pandemic for 2019 on the regional system. And then this is also the full year comparing 22 to 19, and you can see we've had some months that were above in 2019, but overall we've seen an increase in youth ridership on the regional system. And with that, we would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Director Holmstrom.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I have a youth rider, my 3-year-old that I ride with. He likes the blue monster with the one eye. It's the one he likes.
Director Duncan.
Thank you, President Davidson. I have had so many community members tell me, adults, that they don't take the bus because they don't know how, in part. And what starts out as a lack of knowledge of etiquette as a kid turns into an actual barrier to ridership. People have either an unreasonable fear of trying something new, or they're afraid to get to a place, or they don't know how to act in that situation, so they just don't. And I know that this feels like a heavy burden sometimes to deal with it at this level, especially because we're kind of taking it on all at once, a very large population altogether. But to me, this is teaching our kids etiquette from a young age that sets them up for a future where riding the bus is not a scary thing. It's not something that's foreign that they don't know how to do. And then they will also have the ability to continue to teach their younger siblings or the next kid that gets on the bus. So this will not be the heavy lift it is now forever, I hope. And I just really appreciate the work you're doing because it's setting us up for a future of success in a comprehensive way. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Duncan. Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much. Next item is a service change briefing for May 2023.
Which will be presented by Service Planning Manager Chris French.
And I will continue on. So we're very excited. For the May service change, we will be reaching that 100% service level, which means that we are extending our later evening service. That's the bulk of what's happening in May, with the last departure from the downtown transit center and other transit centers at 11 o'clock in the evening. There are a couple additional Route 13 and Route 19 adjustments that are made. We did this when we implemented previously at 100%, but these changes allow service on the 13 to match up to meet the pulse, so it's not offset. It's the only bus that would be quarter till and quarter after the hour if we didn't make the switch in the evenings. And then also, once the buses that serve Kaiser Station go out of service, we're having the 19 go through, similar to what we do on Saturdays. Holiday service, we will be operating all of them at Sunday level, Memorial Day, Juneteenth, and Independence Day. And then on the regional system, we have a couple minor stop changes along those paths. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions, Director Holmstrom?
Yeah, thank you. So for that Route 13 change, does that mean the 3 and the 13 are going to be departing at the same pulse in the evening?
Yes, that is correct. And that is, they kind of share a lot of the same path.
Yeah.
But in looking at being downtown and missing, getting down after everybody's left, and then, so you can't connect any buses, and adding that additional time, in looking at it and working through the process when we actually implemented the service originally, it was decided that that was a better exchange.
There's a
having
trade-off there. I mean, you
A
have to
trade-off, but being able to come in on the 13 and get to any of the buses as opposed to
Right.
not being able to, yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, President Davidson. At the very beginning, it says that the change will begin May 7th and be in effect until September 2nd. Does that mean that we'll have to reevaluate if we can maintain 100% service levels? Or I just was curious why it has an end date, potentially.
So we have 4 signups a year, and September 2nd will be the next service change. And so in July, I will be coming to give a September update with what service is going to look like. And so, yeah, that's the end of the service change, or the service.
Easy. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a similar question to Director Holmstrom's. So I understand that on the Pulse, they will not be on the same, or they will be leaving at the same time. On the return, will they be staggered like they are now? They will not be.
No, because currently the Route 13 is quarter till and quarter after the hour during the main part of the day, which matches up with 15-minute service for the majority of the routes. It doesn't match up with the hourly routes that are like
The 6.
the 23 or the 6 or those routes. But there's more choices after 7 p.m. There's the quarter till and quarter after buses go away. There's no 15-minute service. We dropped a half-hour service, and so it would be the only bus downtown all by itself, waiting to, and they would have to wait to transfer to go anywhere through the system.
And if I'm not mistaken, is it the 16 that's the only one off, not on a regular Pulse?
That is correct.
Okay. And that will remain the same, right?
Yes, we have not, yeah, that one is staying the same at this point in time.
Okay. Could you help me understand why? Sometimes when I'm at the transit center, I see it leave early, and then I have to like frantically check my watch. So that's obviously a me problem. But I'm curious. Yeah, could you maybe help me glimpse under the hood?
So it doesn't pull, the travel time for the route is longer and doesn't pulse in order to allow adequate layover time.
Got it.
That route went through many iterations, or it was changed during the planning process when we implemented moving forward. It had a different path where it would cycle in a certain amount of time, and a portion was added to the route to cover the Reese Hill area, and so that makes it so it doesn't quite cycle in the proper amount of time.
Got it. Thank you.
And just, it's something that we're looking at, and when the South Salem Transit Center is built, it'll be easier to have something that's based out of the South Salem Transit Center, which would allow to cover some of those farther areas out in the south end, and hopefully fix that offset.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions or please?
The time that I've been on the board has just been the entire pandemic, so I'm just so stinking excited to get back to 100% service levels. So thank you, team, for all your hard work, and also I'm so excited.
I will say staff is excited too, or I will say the planning team is very excited.
Fair enough. Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, thank you very much. So next, I'll turn it over to our general manager for his report.
Great, thank you. So since our last board meeting, I attended the APTA Legislative Conference along with Director Navarro, and I'll defer any comments on the conference till after Director Navarro's report. And so that will happen shortly. Last week, we also recognized our transit operators and maintenance employees with the Day of Appreciation and provided breakfast and lunch for them to say thank you for a job well done. Also, I've testified several times since the last board meeting at the legislature, to include just this morning on a Senate Bill 385 having to do with potential changes to the arbitration process for collective bargaining. That meeting was continued, and we'll continue monitoring legislation along with our CFM staff. You've all heard about the electronic fare payment system that we're implementing shortly with our partner UMO. And we have the first 5 fare validators installed on buses. So we have a picture here I think I'd like to share so you can see what the validator will look like. Also this week, I started sharing the results of the customer and the community survey results that you all seen at the previous board meeting. And so presented 2 of them. I have another 4 sessions next week so that all employees can hear directly on the results of the work that they perform. Lastly, Senate confirmations. So as you all know, for those whose terms were getting ready to expire, the plan was to have your confirmation hearings in April. Well, the governor released the list of April confirmations, and we were not on them. So we've reached out to the Executive Appointments Office. What they shared with us is they were focused on the boards that had quorum issues, but they recognized and confirmed we have all the information that we need to provide in, and we are at the top of the list for the May confirmation. So it'll just be another month or so. And we'll follow that to make sure that happens, because we were caught by a little surprise yesterday when that list came out. That concludes my report.
Thank you, General Manager. Next, we'll go ahead and proceed to board reports, and I'll invite Director Navarro to go first.
Awesome. Thank you, President Davidson. So this month has been a busy month. It started off with us taking a family trip to Disneyland, and then as soon as we got back, we went right back. We went off to DC. That trip was really awesome. That conference that we had out there. One thing that I learned that was really interesting was that Cherriots earned a higher net promoter score than Disneyland. So that's all thanks to the work that you guys do out there. I know, that's so awesome. We had a briefing with CFM, our consulting firm, the night before our meeting with our electeds, and they helped us really understand the environment in DC and how to really articulate the issues that we're experiencing with public transit and how we can be reducing the impact on the disadvantaged communities when it comes to air pollution by getting some more electric buses en route. And so it seems like everybody was supportive of that, and so I look forward to hearing back on their support of us. We have a couple events. We have Kaiser Rapids coming up on the 22nd. They're having an Earth Day event, so I invite anybody that can make that to be out there. Let's see what else. And I will turn it back to General Manager Pollock to talk a little bit more about our DC trip.
Great, thanks. So, yeah, I just add a few items. So Director Navarro did talk about our visits to our federal delegation, and we shared with them our legislative agenda and had good discussions on our upcoming grant applications for South Salem Transit Center and low-emission buses. Along with that, we attended the conference portion of our trip, as well as, not yet, go back to the beginning. We also, Director Navarro attended the Transit Board Members Committee meeting, and we also attended a reception sponsored by the Latinos in Transit one night. And so we do have some pictures to prove we were really there. So this was a lunch briefing by President Biden's infrastructure czar, Mitch Landrieu, former mayor of New Orleans. Probably the best speaker the whole time. He was a great orator, and it was really enjoyable presentation. But he also meant business. The key message he said was, "Get it done," because he says every time he talks with the president, he says, "Are you done yet?" He get those projects done. We've got this money, and we want to get it done. So let's go to the next slide. So part of it, we were able to view a new potential entry into the electric bus market. This bus is manufactured in Turkey, and it's a short bus, all electric. One of the challenges they're having is it doesn't meet the Buy America standards, so they're going through that process now. But CFM, our legislative advocates, are working with them to get that through. So they provided shuttles back and forth to the Capitol for people who were interested in testing it out. We got on board, checked it out, and it looks like it could be another potential option as we look at vehicles. Next slide. And then we hopped on the metro and went to the Capitol. So here's a picture of the Metro Center station. We took Metro to the Capitol, took it to, Director Navarro took it from the airport. So we were using public transportation for many of our trips there. Next slide. And while we were there, we did visit our delegation. Here you can see we're in front of Representative Andrea Salinas' office. We met with her office, as well as Representative Lori Chavez de Reamer and both Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden's office. And we met with the Federal Transit Administration staff who oversees the grant programs. Next slide. But we also, in our walks from one side of the Capitol to the other, did some sightseeing. So we got to go by the Supreme Court building, and so we have a picture there. Next slide. And we stopped by to see if President Biden would have lunch with us, but for some reason he was out of town.
Looks like you went at the wrong time for
Well,
lunch.
we went the night before to reserve lunch the next day.
Got it, yeah.
But it wasn't taking any visitors. But we were able to see the White House in all its glory. Next slide. And at the conference, APTA recognized former Congressman Peter DeFazio from Oregon, and the business member of APTA presented him with a $40,000 check to help fund his archives at the University of Oregon. So that was great. And then later that night at the reception, he was there. We had a chance to chat with him, and I'll thank him for the service he's done on behalf of all Oregonians. Next slide. And then we also want to remember the importance of public transit. And this is one of the, this is a statue of Rosa Parks, one of the very few statues that are there, not as part of the two statue representatives from each state, but because of her contributions to civil rights. And so we thought we'd take a picture of that. And I think that concludes the slides. Yep, that concludes the slides. So a great trip. I hope it was a good learning experience for Director Navarro. Of all the, there's lots of moving parts when it comes to a grant application. So when they say it was awarded, there's lots of moving parts that we do, and then there's lots of moving parts that CFM and the delegation and the Federal Transit Administration do. And we appreciate all that coming together as we've been very successful in the last several years. And with that, that concludes our trip report.
Thank you very much. Director Carney, would you like to go?
Yes, I would. Thank you, President Davidson. What I do not envy you 2 trips to the East Coast in 1 month, Director Navarro, but they both sound like they were extraordinary in their own way. So I'm glad you got to go. And I'm super jazzed to hear about our Net Promoter Score outstripping Disney.
That was the Disney in California. But yes, we out net promoter scored
Oh,
them.
yeah, my East Coast roots and my recent Christmas trip to Florida threw me off. So, okay, that makes me feel a lot better about your travel schedule. Um, so let's see. In February, our SCATS policy committee meeting was on the 28th, and we had 2 tip adjustments, both germane to our transit district. One for the South Salem Transit Center and another to adjust the tip so that we could receive funds for 5 electric buses to add to our fleet. So that was exciting. We also adopted safety targets for the transit district. And we started to look at all 9 chapters and appendices for our updated metropolitan transportation plan. And comments are on that plan are due by the 28th. And we have taken some time, some other directors and myself, in particular, Director Duncan, who is my backup, substitute, alternate on the policy committee, and Director Hinojos Pressy, who also serves on the policy committee, to really consider what's in those chapters and how we might add value to them in creating an overall better document. But we have to get those in so that they have time to incorporate them in our next month meeting material. So we hope to do that shortly. And then finally, I have been appointed to the safety committee for the COG and the metropolitan planning area to come up with a new transportation safety plan. And earlier this month, I worked with, I think it's Brian, pardon my lack of specific recall on the name. I would have to look at my email, but I worked with a Cherriots employee to record a social media spot. So if you have seen it, I haven't. I hope it came out okay. And other than that, looking forward to another SCATS policy committee meeting next week on, I think, Tuesday. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Carney, and I have seen the video. It was great. So it's real, and it's excellent. Director Hinojos Pressy.
Well, I don't have that much to report. I did get to go to the state of the county, and I went there with Director Duncan, General Manager Public. You were missed at our table. But yeah, so Director Duncan, pull up the slides. No, I'm just kidding. I'll let Director Duncan share a little bit more about the event, but that's all I have to report.
Thank you. So like Director Carney and Director Hinojos Pressy, I also was able to participate in a video sharing or advertising the survey that the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments is doing around the Transportation Safety Action Plan. So you have until the end of the month to complete that survey. So I'd encourage folks to do that. And then also at the Council of Governments, I have been active in their regular legislative committee meetings. It's the legislative season, so it's rather busy and lots of good discussion in those meetings. The Council of Governments also had their quarterly meeting, and lots of discussion there. A lot of excited anticipation for the Monmouth Independence Trolley, which will launch in April. So a lot of individuals are excited about that. And then I was able to attend the State of the City in Kaiser, and Mayor Kathy Clark did a wonderful job, and it was great to hear her talking about the partnership that we have with the City of Kaiser, and not only the Zero Youth Fair Pass program, but also she gave a lot of kudos to the district in recent years being able to roll out 6-day and then 7-day a week and later weekdays service. And I'm probably quoting her incorrectly, but she said something to the effect of that, we now have a fully functioning transit district because we now are operating 7 days a week. And so kudos to everybody who has had a hand in that. I know it has been a lot of work, especially these last few years under very, very difficult circumstances. So that concludes my report, though I did want to make an appointment, which is I will be appointing Director Duncan to take my spot on the Mid-Willamette Area Commission on Transportation, and then actually we're switching spots, I will then become her alternate on MWACT. So with that, I'll turn it over to Director Duncan.
Thank you, President Davidson. I'm excited to do that, so thank you. So I have 2 pieces to cover, I suppose. So I attended the State of the City for City of Salem, which was a little bit more related to what we do here. They talked about the $3 million infrastructure bond that we passed, as well as many other issues that don't relate directly to this body, but they also talked about downtown parking, which has been a situation for the city for a minute. They did introduce 24/7 security in the parking garages, which would be great for people to utilize when they park so they can take the bus. So I thought that was great. Additionally, they did bring up the topic of paid parking, which has a controversial tone for the city of Salem. There were some groans when that was brought up. But as somebody who wants to advocate for more people taking the bus, I can't personally say I'm wholeheartedly against it. Stats kind of support that when that happens, people are more likely to take public transit. So the next piece is they wanted to cover the opening of the Holman Hotel, which will affect us in that we will be having more tourists hopefully taking the bus. And so with the implementation of our new paperless fare, that should hopefully help facilitate travelers using us rather than maybe Lyft or Uber or similar. This is the big one that I know other people will be interested in, which is that they are hoping to have commercial passenger air July 4th. Which means that we can expect an announcement of who they will be contracting with any day now. That also impacts our service district. Hopefully, again, we want to be able to facilitate any travelers or tourism that is coming through our area to take the bus as much as possible. If we are to meet the Salem Climate Action Plan goals, I don't think they originally factored in commercial air service, so I'll say that quadrupling our ridership, which was the original goal, we're going to need to meet and or exceed that. So hopefully we will be able to work closely with them to make that happen. Additionally, they talked about how McGillcrest will be getting some work done, and they will include the city's first cycle track. So I am excited about that in 2025. The next piece was we went to the state of the county, and they mostly covered wildfire, housing, and mental health, which doesn't relate directly to this body. But there was one quote that stood out to me that I wanted to reiterate, and then I made some edits so that it was more related to what we do here. So one of the quotes was that everything we do is related to natural resources, and limiting the harvest of natural resources crushes the people around you. And as a body that is very committed to the conservation of natural resources, I edited it so that it would serve our purposes. So I edited it to say everything we do is benefited by public resources, and limiting access of public resources disenfranchises the people around you. And I love that this body does so much work to increase access to public resources. And with that, I want to say one last good thing for the new paperless fare that we're going to be hopefully seeing implemented soon. I heard a community member talking about how they were trying to get bus fare together at the last second because they realized that their bus pass had expired like 10 minutes before they needed to get on their bus. So they're at the end of their shift scrounging for $3.25 in coins so they could get the last bus home that night. And I am very excited that very soon our community members will have access to purchase those on their phone and won't have to do these last-minute scrambles. So thank you for all your good work.
Thank you, Director Duncan. Director Holmstrom.
Thank you, President Davis. I don't have much to add. You appointed me to the Community Advisory Committee in our first meeting that I'll be attending as board liaison next month. So looking forward to that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I forgot to call this out when I made a change to the agenda, but this is something that we would have done in the work session if we would have had more time. But I would love to have a quick discussion on the timing of our work sessions. Right now, our work sessions happen immediately preceding our board meetings. And so that really only affords us about an hour every month to have those deep deliberative conversations like we had today. And sometimes it takes a while to have good discussion. It takes a minute to kind of ramp up to that. And so previously, the board used to have these on different days entirely. And so one consideration is that we could revert to that, or an alternative is that we could have special work sessions on a regularly appointed time, but when needed, we could have it on, say, the second Thursday. Or we could just keep doing what we're doing. But I'd love to hear what the thoughts of the board on this particular issue. Please.
I just want to put my 2 cents in of, if we need a separate work session, which I would like to be able to have some topics that we discuss in like a full work session, to put them maybe like on the second Thursday, somewhere around like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. But yeah.
Director Holmstrom?
Yeah, thank you, President Davidson. I think, it'd be good to have a little bit more space sometimes for some of these discussions. And I think sometimes we're just, we're in the groove, we're having these discussions, and I've only been here a few months, but, all of a sudden, like, oh, we got to get to the board meeting. And so it's just a little premature sometimes ending to those discussions. I think it's unfortunate. I was talking with my family a little bit about this, possibility of having another meeting during the month. And I think, they're okay with it as long as there's still like a hybrid option to that, because that makes it a little bit easier sometimes to juggle things. So with that, I think proviso, I think I'm open to that for sure.
Others?
I'd be in favor of something like that. I think some of the, one of the questions that I had was, I understand it's to get more work done, but I'm hoping that it can be at a time that's convenient for the public to make it easier for them to attend. And that was my concern.
Would a second Thursday at 5 or 6 be convenient?
I think 5's a little early.
Okay,
So maybe if we shoot for 6, that'd be more appropriate.
sure. Thank you. Director Duncan?
I'd love to see a little bit more time to discuss and get educated on the issues that we have. I'm all in favor of that. But I want to be conscious of people that have kids. I'm not that person. And I don't want this to become a barrier to people being able to be on the board. So maybe we put in some sort of provision that as we get new board members, that this doesn't necessarily have to, the 2 different days don't necessarily have to be a requirement, and we can make reassessments as needed, so that doesn't become a barrier to somebody being on the board, because I know that's something that we're trying to be very conscious of.
Yeah, thank you for noting that. One other conceptual model is that you could have subcommittees do a lot of this work. One of the reasons not to do that is that then the other 4 board members are not as read in on the items. And so anyways, that's a consideration. Director Carney?
Thank you, President Davidson. I can completely see the value. It was funny, I chuckled when I got the text message advising me of this. I was like, geez, it wasn't so long ago. I remember the board kind of put them both on the same night. But I do appreciate a little bit of space between 5 o'clock and when the meeting would start, to Director Navarro's point. For me, often my meetings run past 5. They did this evening, and so I'm kind of scrambling to make things happen by 5:30. So 6 seems like an accommodating time to me if we were to have 2 meetings a month.
Yeah, I'll say, and I think this is common knowledge to the board members that were on the board at the time, but I was one of the leading advocates for consolidating the meetings, specifically because of the family considerations. And I do concede that there is value in having more robust. Yeah, it is absolutely a trade-off. And so I really like, if I'm going to blow up a night, blow up just one night. Alan probably doesn't like it, but a lot of our meetings are early mornings because that's a time that works around my family. But Okay, yeah. I guess it's actually me that doesn't like it. I'm not the early bird. The early worm dies by the early bird. Anyways, yeah, circle of life here. So what I'm hearing is maybe that we're interested in having periodic ones, but not consistently every month. Is that okay? Any staff considerations?
No, I think, what I'm hearing is, there are certain topics, I'll use the words sometimes there's briefing type things we can do before the board meeting, but when we want to take a deep dive, then those would be the kind of the standalone sessions, where we know it's going to take some time to get into the conversation, and we don't want to cut it short because of an artificial timeline, so. And what we can do is as we develop topics, we can determine, hey, we could do that before the board meeting, but you know what, this one, I really want to spend time, so we'll have that as the standalone. And it sounds like, but we would do those on the second Thursdays of the month at 6 p.m.
That generally works for me, yeah. Director Carney?
I would just, thank you, President Davidson. I would just, if we're gonna have any, I would recommend scheduling them all and canceling them as necessary. Just because for me, it's easier to know that I have something and then to find out I don't have something than to answer a poll and figure out when, you know what I mean? Like if they're coming up every now and then, I would rather have it on my calendar consistently and then be able to remove it. That's kind of the way we end up working in sort of at least my area of state agency land. Like, please just get it on people's calendars and then give them the gift of time and remove it, versus trying to sort of add things in as needed. It just seems to work a little bit better in terms of getting attendance.
Great points. And of course, there is, for a really longer discussion, maybe a retreat is better suited. We don't have to shove everything into these meetings. So, okay. Cool. Clear?
Got it.
Okay. With that, that concludes what we have on the agenda for this evening. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you, everyone, for working behind the scenes to make this meeting run as smoothly as it does, despite my limitations. And with that, we'll adjourn.